The empty chair. The grand convocation chamber of the Galactic Council stretched impossibly high, its crystalline dome capturing and refracting the light of 7 stars. Ambassador Thrix of the Mantodian Collective adjusted his sensory appendages, overwhelmed by the majesty of it all. After 3 cycles of diplomatic service on rim worlds, this was his first time witnessing the full assembly. 2,000 seats arranged in perfect concentric circles, each occupied by a representative from every major spacefaring species in the charted galaxy. The chamber buzzed with mental and verbal communications, translators working overtime as complex diplomatic discussions flowed across species barriers. Impressive, isn't it? Came the melodious voice of his mentor, Senior Ambassador Kalira. The Aqualian's pearlescent skin shimmered as she guided him toward their delegation's position. Most junior diplomats faint their first time. "I'll manage," Thrix assured her, though his carapace was trembling slightly. "I studied the seating arrangement extensively." "Knowledge is different from experience," Kalira replied. The chamber was designed to humble even the most confident beings. As they approached their assigned sector, Thrix scanned the vast array of representatives. The ancient Exoridians with their multiple phase-shifting bodies, the crystalline Oruthi who communicated through light patterns, the gaseous Rel collectives contained in their special environment suits. His gaze fixed on an anomaly, a perfectly empty space at what seemed to be the central axis of the chamber. Unlike temporary vacancies, this position had no identifying markers, no species flag, no diplomatic credentials displayed. Just emptiness where something important should be. "Mentor," he whispered, "why is there an empty position at the central node?" Kalira's fluid movements suddenly stilled, her color shifting to a deep ultramarine that Thrix recognized as discomfort. "That's Earth's seat," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Earth, the human homeworld." Thrix's antennae perked with curiosity. But humans achieved spaceflight centuries ago. Why wouldn't they? "It's not discussed in the chamber," Kalira cut him off, her colors now pulsing with warning patterns. "Take your position." The high speaker approaches. The chamber's ambient noise dimmed as a towering figure entered through the ceremonial archway. High speaker Vroon of the Palaxian Concord, 12 feet of iridescent scales and dignified bearing, took his position at the speaking platform. The session of reconciliation had officially begun. But throughout the proceedings, discussions of trade routes, border disputes, technological exchange programs, Thrix couldn't tear his thoughts away from that empty seat. Earth's seat. The humans were not an unknown species. Their entertainment transmissions had been popular throughout the galaxy for centuries. Their ancient history was studied in diplomatic academies. Yet somehow, their absence from the greatest political body in known space wasn't even questioned. After the 16-hour session concluded, Thrix found himself in the archives wing, his curiosity overpowering his exhaustion. The data terminals glowed softly in the dim lighting as he searched for information about Earth's relationship with the Council. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth. Solar system, Sol. Status. He paused, surprised. Non-participant observer. Voluntary exclusion from Council proceedings as of galactic year 3578. That was nearly 400 years ago. You won't find much more than that. Thrix startled, his exoskeleton clicking in surprise. Behind him stood Jorax, an elderly Centaurian archivist he'd met during orientation. The four-armed being gestured toward the screen with one limb while balancing a stack of data crystals with the others. "Humans are what we call a quiet topic," Jorax continued. "Not forbidden to discuss, precisely, but discourage." "But why?" Thrix asked. "They achieve the technological requirements for Council membership. They've established colonies. They trade with outer systems. What reason could they have for refusing to participate in galactic governance?" Jorax placed his data crystals on a nearby table and looked around cautiously before leaning closer. "There was an incident," the archivist whispered, 4 centuries ago. The council had just finished negotiations with the Arxer hegemony, difficult neighbors from the galactic south. The peace was fragile. Then the humans sent a delegation. And they presented evidence. Disturbing evidence. They claimed the Arxer were merely scouts for something else, something waiting in the darkness between galaxies. The council dismissed it as warmongering. The humans left and never returned. Thrix's antennae quivered. That's all. A diplomatic disagreement. Jorax's expression became guarded. That's the official version. But there were rumors. His voice trailed off, and then he straightened abruptly. Forgive me, this isn't productive conversation for a junior diplomat. Focus on today's proceedings. Thrix recognized a dismissal when he heard one. But as Jorax hurried away, the Mantodian's curiosity only deepened. The next day, instead of attending the secondary sessions, Thrix made his way to the diplomatic exchange. The sprawling commercial district surrounding the council hall where representatives from thousands of worlds mingled in restaurants, relaxation centers, and cultural exhibition spaces. His destination? The Earth Embassy. Unlike the grand structures housing other species delegations, the human diplomatic presence was modest, a small building with simple architecture. No queues of petitioners, no bustling staff, just a single entrance guarded by what appeared to be automated security systems rather than living personnel. Thrix approached cautiously, presenting his diplomatic credentials to the scanner. The doors slid open silently. Inside, the embassy was Spartan but functional. A single human woman sat behind a desk, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes lifting to meet his. Thrix was struck by how physically unimpressive humans appeared compared to their reputation. Ambassador Thrix of the Mantodian Collective, she said, her universal translator rendering her words perfectly. An unexpected visitor. I'm Batasha Rivera. How may Earth assist you today? I'm researching historical council relations, Thrix said, deciding honesty was the best approach. I noticed Earth maintains an embassy but doesn't occupy its council seat. I found that unusual. Rivera's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. Earth maintains minimal diplomatic presence as a courtesy to species with whom we share peaceful relations. Our decision not to participate in council politics was made long ago and remains unchanged. But why? Thrix pressed. The council represents the united will of all sentient species. Earth's voice should be part of that conversation. For a moment, Rivera's professional demeanor cracked. She looked tired, profoundly tired. Tell me, Ambassador Thrix, how long have you been at the council? This is my first session, he admitted. She nodded as if confirming something. Then you haven't been around long enough to notice. Notice what? Rivera stood and walked to a window overlooking the majestic council spires. The Palaxian border conflict with the Jurians. How long has that been ongoing? Thrix thought back to his studies. 300 years, give or take. The Vrel atmospheric rights dispute. 250 years. The Exaridian succession crisis. Almost 4 centuries. Rivera turned back to him. Do you see a pattern, Ambassador? The council doesn't solve problems. It manages them in perpetuity. It's a perfect system for maintaining the status quo, for ensuring nothing ever really changes. Thrix's antennae twitched in discomfort. Change often leads to instability. The council preserves peace. Does it? Rivera's voice was quiet. Or does it preserve the appearance of peace while the real threats grow unchallenged in the darkness? An uneasy silence fell between them. Thrix felt like he was missing crucial context, standing at the edge of an abyss he couldn't see. What happened 400 years ago? He finally asked. What did Earth discover that the council refused to acknowledge? Rivera's face became an impenetrable mask once more. Our position is well documented in the historical record. Ambassador, if you have specific diplomatic inquiries, I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, I must attend to other matters. The dismissal was clear, But Thrix couldn't let it go. As he turned to leave, he asked one final question. The Arxer, were they really just scouts for something worse? Rivera froze, then slowly faced him again. Something like alarm, or was it pity, flickered across her features. You've been asking questions, she said, not a question but a statement. Be careful, Ambassador Thrix. Curiosity about Earth's position has proven hazardous to diplomatic careers. As if on cue, Thrix's communicator chirped, a priority summons from Senior Ambassador Kalira. His presence was required immediately. It seems your mentor is concerned about your whereabouts, Rivera observed. I suggest you don't mention this visit. Thrix left the human embassy with more questions than answers, a growing sense of unease settling in his thorax. Something wasn't right about this situation. Earth's continued absence from the Council wasn't merely a diplomatic choice. It was a statement. A warning, perhaps. And nobody was listening. The forbidden truth. Unauthorized contact with Earth representatives without senior approval is strictly forbidden. Senior Ambassador Kalira's voice was cold, her skin cycling through patterns of disappointment and anger. Your access to the archives has been revoked pending review. You're confined to diplomatic quarters when not attending mandatory sessions. Thrix stood perfectly still in her office, his exoskeleton revealing none of the turmoil beneath. With respect, Mentor, there is no such protocol in the Mantodian diplomatic guidelines. Earth maintains an official embassy. As a credentialed diplomat, I have every right. This isn't about rights. Kalira snapped, her fluid form rippling with agitation. This is about survival. Yours, specifically. She moved to the door, sealed it, then activated privacy screening. The air shimmered as sound dampeners engage. Listen carefully, she continued, her voice lower. The Council operates on consensus and compromise. Earth rejected both. They came here centuries ago with wild theories and impossible demands, threatening to upset the galactic balance. When refused, they left rather than work within the system. What theories? Thrix pressed. What demands? Kalira's colors darkened. That's precisely what you don't need to know. Earth is a diplomatic pariah by choice. Associating with their positions means sharing their isolation. So we just pretend they don't exist. That their seat isn't conspicuously empty at every session. We respect their choice while continuing our work, Kalira corrected. The galaxy has thrived under Council guidance for millennia. Long before humans achieved spaceflight, long after they chose to remove themselves from sensible discourse. Something in her practiced response rang hollow to Thrix. He'd studied under Kalira for years and recognized the particular cadence she used when reciting official positions rather than personal beliefs. You don't believe that, he said quietly. For a moment, Kalira's composure faltered. Her chromatophores flashed patterns of anxiety before settling back to diplomatic neutrality. What I believe is irrelevant, she said eventually. What matters is reality. And the reality is that your career will end before it begins if you continue this investigation. She deactivated the privacy screens, a clear signal that the conversation was over. But as Thrix turned to leave, she added, the Aqualian memory libraries in Sublevel 8. Historical Section 47X, use my access code, but tell no one. And Thrix, her voice dropped to a whisper, be absolutely certain you want these answers before you seek them. The Aqualian memory libraries were unlike conventional data archives. Rather than storing information digitally or physically, the Aqualians, a species with perfect genetic memory, preserved history by encoding it directly into specialized organoids. To access information, one had to temporarily interface with these biological storage units. Sublevel 8 was restricted to senior diplomatic personnel. The security barriers recognized Kalira's access code, but Thrix felt exposed as he moved through the dimly lit corridors. Section 47X was tucked away in a corner, the shelves of memory pods gathering dust. Whatever was stored here was rarely accessed. The pods were arranged chronologically. Fricks located the time period when Earth had severed ties with the Council, carefully removing a small, pulsating orb from its containment field. Following protocol, he placed the pod against his primary neural cluster and felt the cold rush of foreign memories flooding his consciousness. Commander Elena Vasquez stood before the full Galactic Council, her posture military straight, her expression grim. Behind her, a team of human scientists operated a complex holographic display. Distinguished representatives, her voice echoed through the chamber. For the past 20 years, Earth has been tracking anomalous signals from beyond the galactic barrier. We now have confirmation. Something is coming. The display shifted to show sensor readings, gravitational distortions, radiation patterns. Technical data flowed across the projection faster than most could process it. The entity we've detected is vast, a collective consciousness that devours all it encounters. We believe it has consumed at least 3 galaxies before setting its trajectory toward ours. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. High Speaker Vroon raised a limb for silence. Commander, these are extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. These readings could be explained by numerous natural phenomena. We anticipated skepticism, Vasquez replied, signaling her team. The display changed to show footage from an unmanned probe. The images were distorted, but clear enough. An entire star system being systematically dismantled, energy and matter harvested by something that defied conventional physics. Frix's antennae straightened in surprise. You want me? You asked questions when others accepted silence. Rivera said simply, that's a start. As they departed for the Earth Command vessel, Fricks gazed back at the Council spires, monuments to a system that had prioritized stability over truth, comfort over preparedness. The galaxy would never be the same after today. Earth's return had shattered illusions maintained for centuries. Yet in that shattering lay hope. Humanity had never truly abandoned the galaxy, even when rejected by its governing bodies. They had stood guard in the darkness, prepared for this moment, refusing to surrender to the comfortable lies that had seduced the Council. Earth's seat in the Council chamber might remain empty for now, but humanity's presence in the galaxy had never been more profoundly felt. As Thrix boarded the human vessel, a thought crystallized in his mind. Sometimes the greatest act of responsibility isn't working within a flawed system, but standing apart from it when necessary, not in abandonment, but in vigilance. Earth had chosen the more difficult path, bearing the burden of knowledge alone, rather than surrendering to collective denial. The true revelation wasn't that humanity had been right about the threat. It was that they had continued to protect those who had dismissed them, continued to prepare for this day when they could have simply retreated behind their borders and protected only themselves. Perhaps that, more than any technology or military might, was what truly set humans apart in the galaxy. And perhaps that was what terrified the Council most of all. We must go, she said simply. Now. Go where? What's happening? Frix's antennae quivered with confusion. The Council is in emergency session. Something's coming through the Corward Transit Gate. They moved swiftly through deserted corridors. The usual diplomatic bustle was absent, replaced by an eerie silence, occasionally broken by distant alarms. Kilira led him not to the Council chamber but to an observation deck overlooking the vast cityscape of Nexus Prime, the galactic capital. The sky above was alive with activity, thousands of ships, military and civilian, moving in chaotic patterns. Defense platforms glowed as weapons systems activated. In the distance, the massive Corward Transit Gate, a 50-kilometer ring structure that enabled faster-than-light travel between sectors, shimmered with unusual energy patterns. What am I seeing? Frix asked, though dread was already building in his thorax. The end, Kilira replied softly, or the beginning. It depends on whether the humans were right about more than just the threat. The transit gate's energy signature suddenly spiked, its normal blue glow turning a sickly purple. The space within the ring distorted, twisted, and then darkness. Not empty space, but something that seemed to absorb light itself, a perfect void that should not exist in nature. From this impossible darkness emerged something. Not ships in any conventional sense, but vast organic mechanical hybrids that defied classification. They pulsed with internal energy as they pushed through the gate, dozens, then hundreds of them. The entity, Thrix whispered, remembering the memory pod's visions. It's here. Council defense forces engaged immediately, energy weapons and mass drivers firing in coordinated salvos. The attacks seemed to have minimal effect. Some projectiles were absorbed entirely, while energy weapons simply created momentary distortions in the entity's forms before they reconstituted. The Council knew, Frick said, turning to Kalira. They knew for centuries and did nothing. Not nothing, Kalira corrected. They prepared, in secret, inadequately, but they tried. What they didn't do was admit they were wrong. That Earth was right. As they watched, the first wave of Council capital ships were systematically dismantled, their energy and matter visibly absorbed into the attacking entities, which grew larger with each consumption. Why aren't we evacuating? Frix asked. There must be escape vessels. To where? Kalira's colors shifted to resignation patterns. This isn't a localized threat. The entity emerged simultaneously at every major transit gate in Council space. There's nowhere to run. Despair threatened to overwhelm Thrix when a new alarm sounded, different from the others, more urgent. Kalira's attention snapped to a secondary display. Transit signature at the edge perimeter, she said, her voice suddenly animated. Massive energy readings, thousands of vessels. Pattern unknown. The observation deck's displays shifted to show a new development. A vast armada of sleek, angular vessels emerging from hyperspace at the very edge of the Nexus system. Their design was unlike anything in Council records. Gunmetal gray hulls with pulsing blue energy lines, size and configurations suggesting overwhelming firepower. Is it? More of them? Frix asked, fear making his voice tremble. Kalira's colors shifted to a pattern he'd never seen before, something like hope tinged with apprehension. No, she whispered. It's Earth. The human fleet moved with impossible precision, ships functioning as a single coordinated organism rather than individual vessels. They didn't engage directly with the Council defense forces. They completely ignored them, focusing entirely on the entity's manifestations. New weapons unlike anything Thrix had ever seen activated. Beams that seemed to fold space itself. Torpedoes that created localized singularities. Energy fields that somehow separated the entity's composite parts from each other, preventing reconstitution. 400 years, Kalira murmured. 400 years of preparation, while we debated committee assignments and trade regulations. A priority communication cut across all channels, overriding security protocols. A human face appeared on every screen in Council space, a man with dark skin and eyes that reflected the weight of centuries. Attention all Council species and citizens. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have engaged the entity known in our records as the Confluence. Civilian vessels should proceed to designated safe zones transmitted with this message. Military assets should either withdraw to protect civilian populations or coordinate with Earth battle groups if you have compatible systems. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. We have prepared for this day for 4 centuries. We do not seek recognition or apology for the past. We seek only the survival of all sentient life. Earth stands with you, whether you stand with us or not. The transmission ended. Thrix and Kalira watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. The human fleet took losses, significant losses, but for every Earth vessel destroyed, dozens of entity fragments were permanently neutralized. It was a methodical, calculated engagement, suggesting countless simulations and strategic planning. They never stopped protecting us, Thrix realized. Even when we rejected them, isolated them, discredited them, they kept preparing, kept watching. Why? Before Kalira could respond, The observation deck door slid open. High Speaker Vroom entered, flanked not by council guards, but by human soldiers in advanced combat armor. Behind them walked a human woman Thrix recognized immediately, Atasha Rivera from the Earth Embassy, though now dressed in military uniform adorned with significant rank insignia. Admiral Rivera, Vroom said, his voice carrying none of its usual authoritative resonance. The Council has approved your request for temporary command authority over all defensive assets. 400 years too late, Speaker, Rivera replied, but accepted nonetheless. She noticed Thrix and nodded in recognition. Ambassador, I see your curiosity didn't end your career after all. Only because the world is ending, Thrix responded. Rivera's expression hardened. The world isn't ending, Ambassador. Not today. Humanity didn't spend 4 centuries building the most powerful war machine in galactic history just to fail at the critical moment. But why? Thrix couldn't help asking. Why protect a galaxy that rejected you, that called you warmongers and paranoids? Rivera's answer was interrupted by urgent communications from the fleet. She turned away, issuing rapid commands to her staff. Speaker Vroom took the opportunity to approach Thrix and Kalira. The full truth, he said quietly, is more complex than what you learned from the memory pods, young diplomat. Yes, the Council rejected Earth's warnings publicly. But privately, some of us listened. We established covert channels. We shared what technology and resources we could without revealing the threat. Not enough, clearly, Kalira observed. No, Vroom agreed. Not nearly enough. Our fear of panic, of disrupting the delicate balance of power, led us to half measures and compromises. Earth accepted no such limitations. Rivera rejoined them, her expression grim but determined. The primary incursion has been contained. Cleanup operations are underway at secondary sites. Casualty reports are, she hesitated, significant, but we've won this battle. And the war? Thrix asked. The confluence exists across multiple dimensional planes, Rivera explained. What we faced today was merely its first major incursion. There will be others, but we've proven our defensive strategies work. The galaxy has time. Time to prepare properly, time to unite in purpose rather than bureaucracy. High Speaker Vroom's massive form seemed to shrink under the weight of accountability. The Council will need to reconsider many of its foundational assumptions, starting with Earth's seat in the chamber, Kalira added. Rivera's laugh held little humor. That's for politicians to decide. My concern is defense. A junior human officer approached, offering a data tablet. Rivera reviewed it, then looked up with renewed urgency. We've detected anomalous signals from the far rim. Possible secondary incursion forming. I need to return to the command vessel. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Thrix. Ambassador, would you care to observe our operations firsthand? We could use a council liaison with appropriate perspective. This was the Proxima Centauri colony 2 months ago. Vasquez continued, her voice tight with controlled emotion. 15,000 human colonists. We lost contact suddenly. When our rescue fleet arrived, this is what they found. The entity retreated when confronted with significant force, but analysis of its movement patterns confirms it was merely a scout, a fragment of the greater whole approaching our galaxy. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives demanded immediate action. Others dismissed the evidence as fabricated. Still others called for further study before committing resources. Commander Vasquez waited for the noise to subside before delivering her final statement. The Galactic Council has 2 options. 1. Form a united defense front, pooling all available resources and technological expertise to prepare for what's coming. Earth offers all our military and scientific assets to this effort, but we need the full cooperation of every spacefaring species. And the second option? High Speaker Vroom asked. Vasquez's expression hardened. There is no second option that ends with survival. This entity cannot be appeased or avoided. It will reach the outer rim within 100 years. If we do not stand together, we will fall separately. The council deliberated for days. Eventually, a resolution was passed. A small research committee would investigate Earth's claims, reporting back within 5 standard years. No immediate action was deemed necessary without further corroboration. Commander Vasquez received the news with cold fury. 5 years of committee meetings while the threat advances. This isn't governance, it's suicide. Her final address to the Council was brief. Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will not participate in a system that values procedure over survival. When the darkness comes, and it will come, remember that we tried to warn you. From this day forward, humanity stands alone in defense of all life in this galaxy, whether you acknowledge the threat or not. The memory faded, but others quickly took its place. Classified reports confirming the destruction of the Arxer hegemony 70 years after Earth's withdrawal. Official Council explanation. Civil war. Leaked human intelligence. The entity had arrived, consuming its first major target within Council space. Emergency sessions where Earth's warnings were finally taken seriously, but only in secret to prevent mass panic. Public positions remained unchanged. Peace and prosperity under Council guidance. Covert diplomatic channels established with Earth, which had retreated behind a self-imposed isolation barrier spanning their entire sector. Reports of massive military buildup, technological advancement centuries beyond Council standards, entire planetary systems converted to defense platforms. And finally, the most disturbing memory, the Council's decision 200 years ago to establish a containment protocol around Earth space. Not to keep humans in, but to keep the truth out, to prevent the rest of the galaxy from learning that humanity had been right all along, and that the Council had chosen millennia of comfortable lies over difficult truths. Thrix ripped the memory pod away, his nervous system firing erratically from the sudden disconnection. His mind reeled from the implications. For 4 centuries, humanity had been standing guard against an existential threat, while the Council pretended all was well. Worse, they had actively worked to discredit and isolate the one species willing to face reality. A soft click behind him broke his reverie. He turned to find 3 Securate guards, their neural disruptors aimed directly at his central nerve cluster. Ambassador Thrix, the lead guard said without emotion, "By order of the High Speaker, you are detained pending investigation for violations of Council Security Directive 5591. Accessing restricted information with intent to destabilize galactic harmony." Thrix's antennae drooped in resignation. Kalira had warned him, but he'd been too stubborn to listen. As the guards led him away, a thought crystallized in his mind. The human attaché had been right. The Council didn't solve problems. It managed them indefinitely, even when the problem was the end of all life as they knew it. Humanity's return. The detention cell was comfortable enough. The Council never stooped to crude physical punishment, but the isolation was wearing on Thrix's social instincts. 3 days with no communication, no updates on his case, nothing but the hum of life support systems, and his own increasingly desperate thoughts. Then, without warning, the containment field deactivated. Senior Ambassador Kalira stood in the doorway, her skin cycling through patterns too complex for Thrix to fully interpret.